What's going on YouTube? Thanks for tuning into the channel. Welcome to Ozo Simplified, coming to you with a video here about just relax and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Now this video, well before that, like, comment, subscribe. Any feedback, any information will do. Really appreciate it. Really helps a small growing channel. Now this is actually a part 2 breakdown of Transurfing, a book that I started reading last week that I've now completed. Just changed the title because just seeing if it'll get more views with a different title. And I don't want to go as deep into all of the different specifics. There's a few key concepts I'll run through. But just understand that I really, in terms of my feedback on the book itself, it really was a big shift for me mentally in terms of just going through it once. I'm actually going through it a second time. It's by somebody named Vadim Zayland. At the end of the book, he does reveal that he's like a physicist. At least that was what his career was before he got into all this reality transurfing. And I thought that the book was amazing, had a lot of interesting concepts. And the first concept I'll kind of touch on and just kind of apply it to other things I've spoken about in the past is his idea of goals and importance / potential, and then the idea of alternate realities. And actually I'll start with the alternate realities because that kind of sets the backdrop of everything. This is something that in many like esoteric type of wisdoms or texts or teachings, they talk about this idea. Even in quantum physics, this idea is also talked about, that there are a number of different potential realities that are out there at any one given time. And that is a central theme in the book, that essentially what you're doing at every moment is you are tuning into a specific reality based on the way that, you know, your mind is taking you through this existence. And at any point you can jump what he calls lifelines to these other realities that are happening that all exist all at the same time. And the basic metaphor he uses for this is that if you imagine something that is 2D that you can see the entire picture of from a 3D standpoint, at any which point, like if you just imagine, for example, like a comic strip, it wouldn't make sense to the comic strip at point 1 for you to tell it that you can see the same comic strip in real time, how it ends. If you were in that 2D format, you would still be in scene 1 waiting for the scenes to progress. That's basically the same way he explains that our perception of reality is, because we're in the 3rd dimension. There are dimensions that are higher that can perceive all of the time, past, present, and future, and potential realities all at the same time. All that to say that every reality that's possible has already existed and has always existed. All you have to do is act in a way that brings up that particular, what he calls, lifeline. So this idea of alternate realities is that at any moment you're tuning into a particular reality, which you are seeing right now. Now the idea of goals and importance, which this made a huge impact on me, was that a lot of self-development information is kind of more focused on like push, push, push. Set a goal and be like ruthless with yourself to fix it. And you need to change yourself to make things work. This is very antithetical to the concepts that he has. I'm going to start with goals and importance before I get to the change yourself stuff. But the goals and importance, one of the things he says is that the more importance you put on a goal, the less likely you are to achieve it. So the more you have longing, and he uses that specifically, like desire, but it's like unfulfilled. It's just like longing. You're just hoping for something to happen, the more likely it's not. And the way he describes this is that the universe is always looking for equilibrium. And you can observe this in just generally anything. I just recently, well not recently, it's been about a year, I filled in a hole. Like the ground kind of levels on its own. The ground kind of compacts on its own. It's not like one side goes way down and one side goes way up. Everything tries to reach this leveling out. You know, if you have, you know, water, for example, as you pour it in, it doesn't just stay in one side that you're pouring it in. It'll level out unless you have something that's preventing it from leveling out. And his idea is that that's the same thing that reality is doing. So when you put a lot of importance on something and put it on a pedestal, reality wants to bring it down to level it out. Now, he does talk about the way to fix this is for you to just put one foot in front of the other towards the goal, without feeling like you need to overdo. And that is something that is very interesting. And as I always talk, fighting is like one of the main things that I always think about. And in fighting, specifically in jiu-jitsu and grappling, you can see it the most, is that there's a lot of times that if you really want a limb, like you want to get wrist control, you want to get their leg control, you want to grab their neck, the more you try to force it, the harder it is. Like, especially with like a choke, the more you just try to squeeze, generally you almost lessen the pressure. But the more you just focus on the fundamentals of the choke and the technical way that it's cutting off like the carotid arteries, the quicker the choke will go on. And it's something that I did mention in my last video, that it just made a very pivotal change for me, that all of this forcing and focusing and hoping is not actually driving you closer to the goal. It's actually making it harder for the goal to actually happen. The more you relax and let things happen, and even thinking back, it's like every time I think about it in terms of another thing, you know, in striking, you hit harder when you're relaxed. The more tense you are, the weaker your punches are, because it's diffused being tense. And it's the same thing with over importance to the goal. The more you're focusing on the goal, the more you're in this abstract, reality that's in your mind, instead of being focused on the actions and process that it takes you to get to the goal. So that's his first thing, that importance basically aligns you to alternate realities that you don't get what you're putting the importance on. So that's the first piece. The second piece is really about heart and mind unity. Now, this is something that you hear in many different texts or sayings. Your behavior, thoughts, and actions all need to be aligned. Your heart and mind. The reason why he focuses on heart and mind, and Joe Dispenza talks a lot about heart coherence, and that's the interesting thing about this book, is that a lot of other things I've read, it kind of put it more into perspective and tied it all together. That your heart is connected to what he calls the alternate reality field. So the field where all of these potential realities happen, but your heart doesn't have any like intelligence or ability to like break things down. Your mind lives in only, the reflected reality, the reality you're seeing. And it has the power of logic, but it doesn't have a connection there. What you need to do is get your heart and mind connected together. Now, when you can feel that your heart and mind is not connected, is when you feel obligated to do something you have no desire to do. And I have to refrain from using certain words, because the word's not desire, but it's like there's no motivation or energy to do it. Like, you don't have any energy to do that thing because your mind is telling you to do it based on pendulums and different cultures. And you have to watch the first video breakdown to understand what I mean by pendulums. I don't want to make this completely redundant, but based on the different pendulums and cultures that you're around, it's all, convincing your mind to think in a certain way. But your heart understands the way that's beyond what culture has created. Your heart understands the infinite possibilities of realities. And the more that you can connect your mind with your heart and follow your heart with the logic that your mind can create, the more you can find the doors that are going to be more suitable for you than other doors or other particular opportunities. It's going to be connected to stuff that makes sense in the world that you're living, as well as it's connected with what your heart understands is the reality for you. So he talks a lot about listening to the heart and not listening to the mind, but using the mind for its function, which your mind drags around the body. So your mind can get you to do stuff, but it's your heart should be the compass. And that's really the idea that he portrays there, that your heart really knows the answers, and your answers are all inside you. It's that you're listening too much of your mind, which is actually being clouded by what he calls pendulums, which is, the goals and stuff of other intelligent beings being, connected together. But you got to listen to the first one to really understand the pendulums piece, but you could just take it as like culture or environment. Now, the third piece here is actually like a quote from a whole different book, but this is why I was putting kind of my spin on this. This quote is from Bob Proctor, but it fits really into the idea of not changing yourself, which was, once again, a huge radical idea like that. And there's also this there's tons of concepts that I can't touch in this, but this and the idea of importance were really like two main fundamental shifts in the way that I'm thinking. And when I've rethought about my life, it all made sense. But this one is that envy is futile and imitation is suicide. That's a quote from Bob Proctor, but it fits this perfectly. And it's the idea that, once again, envy, when you envy something from somebody else that they have, you have to diminish it. And when you diminish it, that's basically the order that you're putting out to the alternate reality, that you don't want that. Like, I don't like it. You're putting negative, like negative spin on something that somebody else has. People with money aren't that great. Well, then that means that you don't want money. Who needs to eat out at all these nice restaurants? Who needs to travel in that nice thing? And obviously I'm using money, but it could be anything else. Like, who needs to have a girl like that? Who needs to, practice their hobbies all the time? Don't they need to work? When you're saying those things, you're actually putting out that I want to live the lifeline that is connected to not having those things. So that's why envy is futile. It'll never get you what you want. And then the idea of imitation is suicide. Now, once again, I have to use the concept of pendulums because he uses that to describe it. But if you think about the media and things like that, the pendulum or the media or whatever the culture is, what it tries to do is create role models for you to follow after. And these are the ways that you can become successful. And when I think about, for example, university, and this is actually a great example, is that I studied anthropology. Charles Darwin is kind of like the father of anthropology and really where it went with his sexual evolution, what's it called? Social Darwinism, but it's like, so the survival of the fittest mentality is something that is huge. Now, when you read individual accounts of Charles Darwin's life, he was not an academic originally. He was not somebody who loved school. He was actually somebody that was very marginalized by the school system. However, when he became famous and started creating these journals and things like that, when you go to school, they teach you as if this guy was a model student, and if you want to be like him, you study XYZ. But that is not how he learned about it. But the pendulum wants you to think that because it helps bolster their system. That if you're in the academic pendulum, you want that structure to stay. How do you get that structure to stay? Is if you want to be like the Godfather, you need to do what we say the Godfather did. And that's the story that they come up with. And there's plenty of things like this that they tell you, like, this is the way. And one of the main ones you could be, you have to go to school and you have to go to college. And if you don't do that, you're going to be a loser. You're not going to, statistics show that you're going to make $1 million more than just a high school graduate. Even though when you look beyond the curtain, plenty of people have done the opposite and done a ton of other alternatives or options to get where they needed to go. But this all does strengthen the pendulum. Now, the idea that he says here is that he constantly says, and he starts off talking about self-development and how a lot of these books that, you may have read are going to say, like, you need to change yourself in order to do things. And his idea is, like, you don't actually need to change yourself. What you need to do is be aware of the pendulums that are controlling you, which are all these different cultures and different thought processes and groups that you're connected to are telling you that you have to do this, you have to do this, you're obligated to do this, you're obligated to, and start listening to your heart of what you want to do and follow that to your lifeline. And it will never be like somebody else. Like, you can't be like someone else. You can't do it like someone else. And that someone else, and kind of tying it back to the Charles Darwin, was actually in the same place as you at one point, where they were not admired by the pendulum. They were doing the wrong things. Like, and I've given accounts in other videos of Charles Darwin's life, but it's like, he was like a loser. He jumped on the HMS Beagle and was almost like, was not jumping off the ship, because I mean, he's there for 7 years, but he was not happy when he did that. He was failing out of school. His dad was like bribing people to get him jobs. Like, he wasn't this guy. But eventually the pendulum needed to make him a star, because the more that you follow your own way, the pendulum will just use your energy to bolster itself. And I gotta get away from the pendulum, because I haven't defined it that well, and I keep using the term. But the idea is that the qualities you have, you cannot hide. You can't be a shy person that tries to act confident, because you're gonna come off as awkward. You can't be a corny person that tries to act super cool, because the idea of copying cool is not cool. You know, cool is in its own. So the idea is for you to really understand yourself, go in and listen to your heart, as corny as it sounds, and focus on who you truly are and display that to the world. Because for all of your shortcomings, there are benefits to all their shortcomings. So for one of them, he was saying shyness, he used as an example, which made a lot of sense. It's like, in a world where everybody likes to talk and everybody likes to say what they need to say, shy people have the benefit of being great listeners. Shy people also have the benefit of being mysterious. They're not an open book. There's a benefit to being shy. And he basically describes that a lot of these things that you do or naturally have that you want to fit in are actually benefits. The only reason you think they're weaknesses is because whatever pendulum you're thinking under, or culture you're thinking under, it's a negative to the pendulum. You know, it's not a negative for you, and none of the pendulums are there to help you. They're to help itself. So the idea of a corporation, you know, the corporation in itself is a pendulum, and that corporation wants to preserve itself. It's not interested in preserving any particular person. That's even why there's hostile takeovers from CEOs that create their own company, because it starts to create on a mind of itself. So what you always need to do is focus on what you want to do, and understand any feeling that you need to change something is something from the pendulum. And it's actually a very simple one, is that, you know, no dog thinks it's ugly. Like, a dog, all dogs think they're good looking. No matter, they got a mole on their face, they got an underbite, missing an eye, ain't got two of the legs, hopping around like a kangaroo. They all think that they're attractive. Like, humans are the ones that have all of these insecurities or confidence, which is another one I'm gonna throw out there, that he basically equates them as the same thing. That insecurity is when you're anxious about something that you have that's like a weakness to the pendulum, and confidence is something that you have that's a benefit to the pendulum. Like, both come from the same feeling of, you know, an anxiousness. It just depends on whether or not you think you got it or you don't got it, which is another interesting piece. But that's it for this one. I just wanted to give you guys some of it, but the main thing that I took away from this is that the way nature does stuff is in a slow, methodical, step-by-step motion. And that is the way that you can approach your life. You don't have to feel like you need to get it all in one swoop. You got to do everything in one day. Be happy for the now. Take steps towards what you need to do, and everything will fall into place. You don't know how things are going to play out. And in this world of alternate realities, if you want a different reality, you need to be open to new things happening. So that's really it for this one. Just needed to get something up here. I'm going to stay true to the things that I said. Gonna get some new content, new formats out there, but did want this one up. That book really changed my whole mentality of everything. Like, comment, subscribe, dislike if you didn't like. Any feedback will do. And until next time, you know what it is. Peace.